Okay, this is a review of the math part for your test. You're going to see a sheet that looks very much like this where you're going to have to calculate average product and marginal product. Average just means on average how many did each person make, and so once again you're going to take your output, and that's what this column is, output, and you're going to divide it by your inputs. And so when we have one worker making 4, 4 divided by 1 is 4. When we have 2 workers who make 9, we are making 4.5. When we have 3 workers making 15, 15 divided by 3 on average each one is making 5. We have 4 workers making 20, once again on average each one is making 5. When you have 5 workers making 24, on average each one is making 4.8. When you have 6 workers making 26, on average each one is making 4.3. And when you have 7 workers making 25, on average each one is making 3.6. So we're going to take the output divided by the input. 4 divided by 1, 9 divided by 2. When you do that, you are finished with this column. And once again, this is our average product column. On average, how much did each worker make? So you're finished with this column. Do not use this column to do marginal product, because what we're looking at is when we have one person making 4, and actually we're not even going to do this column, but we could do this column. But when we add an additional worker, because remember marginal means additional, when we add that second worker, worker was making 4. How many did that second worker add? And we can see that that's 5. And the calculation for doing this is the change in output. So we're going to look, the change is 5, and the change over input. So the change is 1. So 5 over 1 is 5, and I'm only going to change it by 1 each time. So when you had 2 workers making 9, you now have 3 workers making 15. So that third worker actually added 6. The difference between 9 and 15 is 6. So when we added the fourth worker, they added 5. When we added the 6th worker, 4 were making 20, 5 making 24, so that 5th worker only added 4. When we add the 6th worker, that 6th worker added 2. That's the difference between 24 and 26. And you notice when we added the 7th worker, we actually are going backwards. So that 7th worker actually took away -1. And so calculating, and we've done that, calculating books per worker, which is your average product. We calculated the marginal product. What does, and sorry, there's a loss in translation here when we went from one program to another. So what does books per worker column? That's your average product. How much does each worker add, or not how much does each worker, let's do that again. Average product on average, how much did each worker make? And we can see that when we look at 7 workers making 25 on average, each one made 3.6, but we can see that last one actually went backwards. So at what point did diminishing returns set in? Because remember, at first labor's contribution is positive. We go from making nothing to 5, and then we increase, so we have increasing returns to scale. The moment we're still going up in terms of total product, but we're not going up as fast, that's the point where diminishing return sets in. So at 4 workers, diminishing returns is setting in. And at what point does negative return set in? The moment our productivity actually starts to go backwards, and that's at 7 workers. So which column, books per worker or marginal product, is more important? Hopefully you see that when we're trying to decide how many workers that we are going to add, we're going to actually need to look at the marginal product, because here we're going, that's great, people are still producing. But over here we see as we add additional workers, our productivity is starting to slow down to the point where we're actually going backwards. So marginal product is the more important column.